Welcome to the 330 Sports Show. My name is Justin Coffin, and today is Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. We are broadcasting live from downtown Youngstown, Ohio, and we are produced by Joe Danier's Youngstown Studio Network. It is Election Day here in the United States and a pivotal day in this country. We may or may not, if we have time, we'll get into some interesting, fun Election Day facts, but we're going to get into the sports side of things here first. If you would like to be a part of the show, you can always call. You can always call in 330. Joe, what's that number again?
330-595-1600.
Thank you. And the text and voicemail line is 330-333. 5265. So, we would love you to be a part of the show. So feel free to give us a call, or if you're not able to call in live, you can leave a voicemail or text any questions or comments or concerns or whatever you got on your mind, especially related to sports, or if you want to get into election talk, that's fine too. But on today's show, we're going to focus on around the NFL this past weekend. We're going to talk about the Browns. We're going to talk a little bit about the Steelers. We're going to look at the college football world and have an Ohio State recap. Also wanted to say rest in peace to Sean Connery. Another just tough loss for 2020. You just feel like a lot of legends are falling, and in just what's been a rough year overall for this. Just 2020 in general has been a tough year. So we're going to talk about a lot of that stuff with sports, a little bit of baseball talk, and like I said, if there's any time at the end, we will get into some interesting facts about the election. All right, so let's start off with the. I'm going to call it the bad from the weekend, the Browns and Raiders. Joe, have you ever heard of the word grapple before this weekend?
No, never.
Well, I think in the Browns Raiders game, it was such, and I hate to use the word boring because, games that rely a lot on the run game and stuff, we're so used to the aerial attack, we're so used to, guys throwing for 300 yards and offenses going up and down the field, where this was sort of a little bit of a more old school football game. And it relied heavily on the run game. But I felt like the announcers, going back to that word grapple, that was the term they used for the weather. So it was a little bit of rain, a little bit of sleet, a little bit of maybe even small hail mixed in there. And you had, consistent 30 to 35 mile an hour winds with gusts 55, 60 miles an hour. And as a Browns fan, I loved going to games at the stadium when it was in September, maybe even early October when the weather's nice. And once you get into these games, these are the games I like to watch at home, not technically be there, especially on a day when you get beat 16-6, So I had never heard of that word grapple before. What were your overall thoughts on that game? On
speaking of that weather, like I took Debbie, my wife, to her first NFL game, and it was in Municipal Stadium.
Okay.
Houston Oilers. And it was one of those days where it was sleeting and so cold coming off the lake. So it is miserable no matter who you are. But historically, that means that, you have a great running game. You're going to do really well in cold weather. But I think what happened last week is that we had like all those completed passes and we had all that success because of the high scoring, passing game. I think we got a little overzealous and put too much pressure on that rather than going to what, the ground game, which we could have probably had a little bit more success had we done that.
Right. Well, I overall, I thought Kareem Hunt played a fairly decent game, but you can see the loss of Nick Chubb is starting to show its head, where you don't have, that second guy, Johnson, the backup right now to Hunt, he's I would say a slightly below average back. Whereas, if you have Chubb as your first back and then you're bringing in Hunt, you're really not missing a beat. But, we can't rely as heavily. You can't, Kareem Hunt doesn't seem like a guy that's going to run the ball 20, 25 times a game.
Correct.
You know, if you can get him the ball in his hands 10 to 15 times a game, I think that's kind of his.
Yeah, he's a good utility back, you know, like put him in the flat or something like that, and it's great.
And I'm not calling him not tough. I just don't know if he has that durability like Nick Chubb would, you know, to run the ball 30 times a game. So I think Nick Chubb being out, you know, the last few weeks, you know, has hurt the Browns a little bit, but they were able to make up for it because of, well, the weather was decent. They were able to throw the ball, get the ball downfield, and make up for that. But today, or I'm sorry, on Sunday, it showed that, you know, hey, this is a huge cog in our offense.
Yeah, and I think we were too single dimensional too. Like if you would have had more play with your tight ends and had those little drop passes, we could have eaten them up that way just as well as the ground game. But I didn't see us do any of that.
Yeah, and the Browns, going back to what you said there, you know, the Browns made the Browns were self-inflicted, ton of self-inflicted wounds. You know, the very first drive of the game, they're driving down, they get into I almost want to say Oakland, but Las Vegas, inside their 30-yard line, and they fumble. You know, the tight end Harrison Bryant, who's been really good, you know, but he showed he's not, you know, he's able to make mistakes too. So
and all these drop passes, I mean, I think that's killing them.
Well, and Njoku is one of those guys that is so athletic, so talented, but you can see why he isn't one of the elite tight ends in the game, because he's just simply not consistent. You can't count on him. I believe it was a 3rd and 8 in that game, and it was a huge play in that game. You convert that down, or that first down, you're inside the Oakland, there it is again, Las Vegas 30, and you know, you're possibly driving to score a touchdown. 2 plays in that game that really drove me nuts were Baker threw one, I think it was about a 20-yard pass, and Jarvis Landry dives. They call it a touchdown on the field, and then they go back and overturn it. Later in that game, then, very, very similar play. Vegas throws almost an identical pass, and they review it and they confirm it for a touchdown. And it just that was really it. You know, it just feels like, as a Browns fan, it's like, well, that's our luck. And that day, it just it felt like nothing was going right. It just, again, didn't feel like our day. And another frustrating part of that is, you know, the Browns are a cold weather team. They're built for the running game. And we got beat at our own game by a team from Las Vegas who plays in a dome. So, you know, we had a viewer just write in, Chubb led the league last year in yards after contact. And so I think we really missed that on, you know, Hunt had some nice runs, but like he didn't, you know, break the big run and, you know, get the Browns into, you know, easily scoring position.
Now, question for you. I didn't get to see the game. I heard the whole thing on Browns Network. How the defense actually look?
The defense, that's what I was.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry to get ahead of you.
No. That's they look bad. They, frankly, you know, they only gave up 16 points, but again, that was partially due to the weather. But here's an interesting stat I had. This is mind blowing, and it's about the offense, but it's directly related to the defense. The Browns had 6 possessions. They possessed the ball 6 times the entire game. That is the fewest in any game the past 30 seasons. 6 times. So that basically means the defense could not get the Raiders off the field. Yeah, right? They could not. Vegas had drives. And this is just 4 different drives I wrote down. They had drives of 16 plays, 12 plays, 15 plays, and 13 plays on the day. You know, to go along with their other drives.
That's how you get your defense more hurt than it already is.
Well, exactly. Yeah, they're beating up the defense. I will say, you know, Myles Garrett only played about a third of that game because he had a little bit of a banged up knee. He's going to be fine. He's going to play. And they also have the bye week coming up. But the Raiders ran the ball 45 times for over 200 yards in that game. And that really, really, you know, was a dagger to the Browns because, you know, the thing that is frustrating is, you can occasionally give up a 20, 30-yard run, but the Raiders were just getting those like little chunks, those like 4 to 6 yard gains where, they move the chains, they keep the clock running and the ball is always in their possession. But like you said, it beats up the defense, and that after a while just wears on you.
It's what exactly we should have been doing. Those were Nick Chubb type of runs.
And I think, from what the Browns report and what the doctors say, it sounds like he's going to be back after the bye week, which is crucial. So the Browns will get Chubb back. Hopefully they get their right tackle back, Teller. Hopefully they get Austin Hooper back, their tight end. And today is the trade deadline in the NFL.
Is Njoku going anywhere?
I don't expect him to. I'm keeping my phone by me just in case there's any alerts, but I'm not expecting him to, just because Stefanski likes to play 2 tight ends. In that game, they were even playing 3 tight ends at some points. So he still is a valuable member. And if you're not getting a 3rd round pick or 4th round pick for him, they're going to keep him, because he's not consistent, but he's still better than what you're going to get in a trade. Now, with that said, we'll see if a wire comes through and they do pull the trigger. I'm not expecting the Browns to make any huge moves today, but I really, really hope they do something to shore up that defense, whether it's a corner, a safety, a linebacker, a pass rusher, whatever it might be. Get somebody in there that can help you, because if you have a good defense, that's going to help your offense, and vice versa. Absolutely. So they might even want to get a guy like a Will Fuller from Houston, who is a deep ball threat. So if the Browns can again stretch the field, you see OBJ's lost too. It's only one game, and again, bad weather, so maybe we can chalk this up to, hey, it just wasn't our day. And the Raiders, I hate, a lot of people were going into that game expecting us to win. The Raiders are not a bad team. Right. They are not a bad team. They beat Kansas City.
I don't remember. Was that one of the games where you said is very winnable on your list?
I had the Browns as they would be favored in that game, but it was, I think the spread at the kickoff was about a 2.5 point spread, so it was a fairly close. And you and I both picked the over, and I had a couple of family members that saw my picks last week. And actually, by the way, my picks went 4-1. The only one that didn't hit was the over. And I said, well, I usually make those picks like Wednesday night. I didn't look at the forecast, so I'm gonna take that as I'm gonna take that.
Whether it was nicer, it would have been a higher scoring game.
Right. All right. Yeah. So we'll see. But a bunch of mistakes. The Raiders just outplayed us. They were better. And John Gruden, head coach of the Raiders, he's known for having very physical offensive lines, a good running game, and you know what? They were the better team, and I think what we do with this game, you turn the page, you don't quite burn the footage. Hopefully this is a game where you can take something out of it, where you're saying, hey, we got to shore up our run game. We got to be tougher. We got to be physical in the trenches, and that's what we got to do. Hopefully,
it wasn't a blowout, and you can't say that like we lost that game by being stupid. It was just we got outplayed, whether it be coaching or talent on the field. It's just you lost. That was a real loss.
And I honestly don't think it was really coaching. I think we were just out physicaled in that game. I really, really do. So the Browns are 5-3. We're halfway through the year. We got a bye coming up. This is kind of a nice week for the bye week because you're right at the midway point of the season. So if before the season started, I thought the Browns were a 9-win team. 9-7 is what I had them at. So 5-3. So that would mean, you got to win 4. You got to go 4-4 the rest of the way to finish 9-7. If you would have told me that at the beginning of the season, we'd start 5-3, I would probably been happy with that. What do you think? Are you happy with 5-3?
But it's weird because our expectations keep notching up as you see successes. So, but if you look at it from the same perspective as the season started, you're like, we're way ahead of where I thought we would be, no doubt.
And where I think the Browns have a lot of really nice pieces, but are we a complete team? No. Can the Browns win a game in the playoffs? I think they can. Are they a Super Bowl team? No. But again, this is a very important year for the building and hopefully getting a little bit better each year. And especially these young guys that are going to be with the team in 3, 4, 5 years from now, they can build off of this year and grow from this. So that's kind of where I'm at. Looking at the Browns, the rest of the schedule, and we'll get more into this next week, but 3 of their next 4 games they should win, and there's usually a couple games on the schedule where a game you maybe should win that you lose, and maybe a game that you should lose that you win. So I'm looking at this back half of the schedule, and I'm looking at 5-3.
Okay,
that's what I'm looking at. You got one more with the Steelers, you got one more with the Ravens, and
I'll take a 10-6 any day of the week.
I really think in the AFC. It might take 10-6 to make the playoffs, because this Raiders team is now going to fight for that last spot in the playoffs. So we shall see where we go. And
you said they were 3-3, the Raiders?
The Raiders are now 4-3.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
So they were 3-3 coming into that game. So I think they're going to be a viable playoff team, and we'll see where that goes. All right, let's move on to the Steelers and Ravens. So Steelers and Ravens. And again, I'm not a Steelers fan. I despise both of these teams. This is one of those games where I just want both teams to beat the hell out of each other. And, if you never wish for injury on a player, but if maybe they miss a week or two and it's nothing serious, oh well, maybe if that affects their next game, but again, I'm not rooting for injury, but you love to see them beat the hell out of each other. And that's really what happened in this game. But the Steelers really, I thought actually the Ravens outplayed them, but the Steelers defense is really opportunistic and made some really nice plays. This stat was really interesting and stuck out to me. This is the first time since 1950 that a team was outrushed for 200 or more yards. So the Ravens outrushed the Steelers by 200 plus yards and outpassed the Steelers in the game.
Total offense, dominated,
and they still lost. So, and they still won. So, the Steelers moved to 7-0. They are arguably the best team in the NFL. So
it was a fun game to watch. It really was.
I just caught a little bit of it because I saw, I was watching the Browns game and these two overlap, but that game ran a little bit longer. But the Steelers really stepped up when they needed to and made the plays that mattered. J.K. Dobbins, though, for the Ravens, a former Buckeye, had a really nice game. And really, though, overall, the Ravens, I said, as a team, had a nice offensive game overall, but the Steelers made the plays when it mattered most. So
yeah, I'm telling you that the Steelers, that they are in their playoff mode right now.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, they are a Super Bowl caliber team.
Absolutely.
I hate to say that hurts me inside.
I had the Steelers before this season. I had the Steelers and Browns both 9-7 fighting for that 6th or 7th playoff spot. But at this point, the Steelers are going to have 9 wins by game 9 or 10. Right. So, and they play the Cowboys next. So it's not getting that tough for them. So we shall see. We shall see what happens. So Joe, I'm gonna have you queue up the NFL scores from Sunday. We obviously had the Thursday night game, and last night Tampa Bay took care of business versus the Giants in what was a lot closer game. But just looking at some of these scores, Minnesota upset Green Bay, and they really did a nice job. Aaron Rodgers, fantastic game, but Minnesota outplayed them. The Bengals go on and whoop on the Titans, who the Titans came in, really, really good. And the Bengals looked solid, winning that game 31-20. Kansas City, who was my lock of the week, with that 19.5 point that spread, they easily covered that, winning 35-9. Indy whooped on Detroit 41-21. Again, we already talked about the Steelers Ravens. Tua for Miami really took he didn't have to do much, but they took care of business and they beat the Rams 28-17 in his debut. Tua threw for less than 100 yards in that game, but the defense and special teams really won that game. New England had a late charge, but Buffalo held them off 24-21. And then the Broncos with a surprising 31-30 victory over the Chargers. Now, I saw an interesting stat, again, from the weekend. The Chargers are the first team ever, I believe, to lose 4 consecutive games by that they were winning by 16 points or more. So just a really interesting stat there. New Orleans took care of Chicago 26-23. There was an interesting fight in that game that I'll have to show a clip of maybe on Thursday's show, but it was it was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And I had never seen this guy. This one wide receiver, his name is Wims for Chicago, came up and tapped this corner on the chest, and then he just cold cocked. But apparently earlier in the game, and this was really interesting because I didn't see this. I went back and looked at. Apparently, the corner for New Orleans ripped his mouthpiece off without anybody seeing and threw it on the field. So that really got this guy pissed off. And then later on, he remembered it. The very next play, which was like, I don't know, minutes later, came on the field and then did that after the play. So just thought that was really interesting.
He get ejected?
He got ejected, and he'll be suspended for the next 2 games, which he should have, because if you saw that smack. And another thing, why the hell are you punching anyone? I think he had his hand open, but why are you hitting anyone with a helmet on? I'll never understand that. Never understand that. And then just 2 more games. Seattle continues to dominate at least on offense. Russell Wilson, I believe, is the clear MVP this year. And the 49ers just absolutely decimated by injuries, lost Garoppolo again. And now George Kittle's going to be out for 8 weeks, which is equivalent basically to the season. So the 49ers, with everybody healthy, they're a playoff team. They have a chance to win that division, but with all these injuries, they're probably going to finish in 3rd, possibly last in that NFC West, which is really good. And then finally, the Eagles and Cowboys. The Eagles, the Eagles look good, but the Cowboys, again, not a very good team, on their 3rd string quarterback right now, and just struggling for the year. So.
Poor Zeke.
I know. Poor Zeke. Well, and Zeke really hasn't looked like himself, but if the defense can kind of key on him, then, he's got a lot to deal with. So
now when you see all these old Ohio State players go to NFL, you secretly pull for them for the rest of their career. I do.
Right? Unless they're playing for the Steelers. And even like J.K. Dobbins, I'll root for him, but if he's playing against the Browns, I'm rooting for the Browns. Right. You know what I'm saying? But Zeke, and I mean, the Browns, the Buckeyes have so many NFL guys right now. Like Malcolm Jenkins was a perfect example. I was watching the end of the Saints-Bears game, and I'm like, if Malcolm Jenkins, who's a safety for the Saints, I said, if he was on the Browns, he makes an impact where the Browns might win that game on Sunday. Just that one player might make a difference. So because he's good in pass coverage, he can stop the run, and that's where the Browns are hurting right now, is the safety position. So, but yeah, to answer your question, yes, I'm rooting for him unless they're on the Steelers or occasionally the Ravens. So. All right, so I'm going to switch gears now, and I am going to go to the Ohio State-Penn State game. So I'm going to put up the graphic of Justin Fields. Justin Fields has been absolutely fantastic this year. You can see the stats. He was 28 of 34, 318 yards and 4 touchdowns against a very, very, very good Penn State defense. Here's an interesting fact too: 7 touchdowns on the season, 7 incompletions. So, we're very early sample size, but I think he has taken over probably to be the favorite for the Heisman. we'll get into Trevor Lawrence here in a little bit and what happened with him. But this Ohio State offense looks unstoppable. The running game got back on track. Master Teague looked good. He ran for over 100 yards. Sermon's starting to get his feet under him. Looks pretty decent. In Ohio State, their receiving core is just dynamic, and with Fields the way he is able to deliver that ball, Olave and Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave had seven catches for 120 yards, 2 touchdowns. Garrett Wilson 11 catches for 111 yards, and he also had a 62-yard run on the very first play of the game to get the Ohio State offense going.
Can I bring up the weird one?
Please.
All right. What's with that free field goal that going into the half? What the heck was that?
Now, yeah. So the play you're referring to, I believe there's 2 seconds on the clock.
2 seconds.
So there's 2 seconds on the clock. Ohio State has a 4th down. They don't want to punt it to risk, getting blocked and returned, or, the receiver bringing it back for a touchdown or whatever. So from what I understand, 2 seconds on the clock, you do your count in your head. You go 1,001, 1,002, kneel the ball, go to halftime. So apparently players, that happened, went to halftime. Both teams were in either the tunnel, or some players were even in the locker room. And then the officials bring them back on the field and said, no, there's 1 second left. So what I understand happened was, and the game was at Penn State. If that game's at Ohio State, that doesn't happen because you got your home timekeeper. But, I think whatever they do, flick a switch or press a button, I think that was pressed maybe a second late. So that 2 seconds became 3 seconds. Right. And so
it became first down for the other team with 1 second to go because that was 4th down.
And it just so happened they would have been in field goal range, and they were able to get that. So I think instead of a 21-3 game at halftime, 21-6.
So now if you're the quarterback, momentum. Do you hang on to that until you hear a whistle, or like what's appropriate?
Well, that's a good question, because
you don't want to get laid out because
I personally think they probably should have just punted it. And, they told the punter, basically, if you're going to, the punt looks like it's going to get blocked, just go down. Because by the time the snap comes back to him, he can assess the situation. That's well over 2 seconds. Or just get it, punt it, and punt it out of bounds. Yeah. Because the time the ball's in the air, the clock doesn't stop till the time, I believe, the ball hits the ground. So,
it was silly. No matter what, it was silly. Yeah. Now They had a gripe, and it didn't end up mattering, but it's still Day was not happy. Nobody was happy.
And I wouldn't be either, because, that makes him look a little bit silly on that too, or it's like, he did the right thing. And I did see someone on Twitter with a stopwatch and all that bullshit. And I was just like, come on, just, we don't need to get that serious. But, was it, I think it was just maybe a little bit of a homer, timekeeper or whatever, official score or whatever they are. But
you've seen some of like the end of games where it's a blowout, and they'll like nudge the end of the game where people run out of the field even before it's over. Come on. You could be dicks about it on that thing too, but they never are, because it's a safety thing more than anything.
Right. Well, and that play ended up, it meant something, because Penn State was able to go out, stop the clock, on a change of possession. There's no time, the clock stops immediately. So they got that 1 second, kick the field goal, and then, you're down 15 instead of down 18. So you're down 2 scores instead of 3 scores, which makes a difference. And then I think they came out and scored right away, which, put the Buckeyes in a little bit of jeopardy. Luckily it didn't matter, but yeah, that was an interesting play, and I had never seen that before. So, and which then, getting to the end of my notes, I'll talk about the over and the total in that game. But to get back to Ohio State's, we talked about the offense, but the defense is where a lot of the questions were, especially the defensive line. The defensive line for Ohio State has really been their strong point this year. I had Mark Smaldino on, who's one of the Ohio State students, show contributor. He talked about this guy named Tommy Togiai. Honestly, I had never heard of him before the season. He's a junior now, but he was fantastic, and he's arguably been Ohio State's best defender on the season. He just really clogged up the middle and, stopped the run game, but also got after the quarterback. Jonathan Cooper, Haskell Garrett. Now, here's an interesting story. Haskell Garrett, he's a defensive lineman for Ohio State. He's from Vegas, but sometime in the summer, and I don't know the scenario or what happened, but he was shot in the face.
What?
Shot in the face. And I don't know where this happened or the circumstances or whatever, but regardless, he was shot in the face. So apparently what happened was a bullet went in one cheek, out the other. And they even noted in the game, like, he's still not quite eating solid foods right now. He's drinking a lot of like smoothies and shakes and stuff like that. And that was just an insane. Yeah. So I don't know the backstory on that, but for him to be back playing football at this level that he's at is pretty remarkable. So Haskell Garrett, nice job. Tyreek Smith, Zach Harrison, they all combined, all those guys I named combined for 18 pressures against a good Penn State offensive line. Now, where Ohio State's struggled, especially in this game, was in their secondary. So Sean Wade, who has been, who will most likely be a first-round pick, came back. He's the Buckeyes' probably their best defender, but he struggled a little bit in this game, and Penn State was able to hit some passes on him, and so that showed a little bit maybe of a weakness for Ohio State, but the nice thing about games like this is you go into Penn State, you beat a good Penn State team, and there's still lessons to be learned. There's still things you can get better at. There's still things to clean up. And as a coach, I think that's the best case scenario where you win, and you win fairly comfortably. The game ended up finishing like a 13-point, I think it was like 38-23 or something like that, or 38-25. It was 38-25. So you still win comfortably, and I think Ohio State won by more than the score indicated. But you leave that game and Ryan Day is like, hey, well, we can clean this up on offense, or we can clean this up on defense, and things like that. So I think overall that's probably the toughest game on the Buckeyes schedule, and we'll see what happens with them going forward. Now, they did miss 2 field goals, and they did have 2 injuries in the game. Luke Farrell, the tight end, one of their tight ends, went down, and I think he's going to be okay. But they did lose one of their corners for the season. He tore his Achilles, Cam Brown. So that's just going to mean that, somebody else has got to step up and get, and fill that void. So also Ohio State's kicker left the game, and they then missed 2 actually he missed the field goal and I believe got injured on that play. And then the backup kicker came in and he made one, but then he subsequently missed one later on in the game. So with all the weird things that happened on the field goals and stuff, the over under for that game was 63. Some places right up to game time had it 62.5, 63.5, but when I saw it on Wednesday night and Thursday, it was exactly at 63. So it pushed once again. So, I mean, it's just one of those things that it's like some of these lines you look at and it's like, how does, Vegas so nails them. So I don't know what it is, but yeah, just unbelievable. I'm going to switch to a separate graphic here and bring up the top 25 in the Associated Press poll that we're going to talk about a little bit here. So you can see Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, 1, 2, 3. Alabama really pushed Clemson in the voting, where Clemson struggled this week. Clemson was on the ropes against Boston College. Now, why were they on the ropes against Boston College? Because they didn't have their quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. So Trevor Lawrence, as we know, has tested positive for COVID-19. He will not play again this week against Notre Dame. So Notre Dame, the 4th ranked team in the country, Clemson's going to take their number 1 unit in against them into South Bend, and we'll see how that game goes. Looking at it, last time I checked the line, Notre Dame was a 5.5 point underdog in that game. But this is a big week for college football. You got Clemson at Notre Dame. So you could almost call this a semifinal game where, the winner could make it to the ACC championship. However, I could see almost a built-in excuse for Clemson where, we lose this game. We didn't have our quarterback. And then they play Notre Dame possibly again in the ACC championship. They both have one loss. They're putting Clemson and Trevor Lawrence in. So there's that game. Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, I think are clear 1, 2, and 3. Notre Dame, Georgia, I believe are the next tier. And then, we move on after that. But, you got Cincinnati Bearcats sitting at number 6 in the country. Pretty impressive. Luke Fickell, former Ohio State player. He transitioned from Jim Tressel to Urban Meyer in 2011. And you look at some of the rest of the teams on that list. Wisconsin is now not going to play their second game in a row. They canceled this past weekend against Nebraska. They have canceled again this weekend against Purdue. I feel like these teams, Nebraska and Purdue, are being punished because Wisconsin has this outbreak on their team, which may not be their fault. I don't necessarily know the circumstances, but that's going to be interesting to see what happens with Wisconsin going forward. And just a couple other notes here. The Pac-12 is coming back this weekend, so you can see Oregon now in the top 25. They're sitting at 12. USC is also in there at 20. But a couple other facts. Tomorrow night, MACtion returns. So you get the MAC back and the Pac-12 back. So the MAC is going to be playing Tuesdays and Wednesdays, the first couple of weeks of their season. So pretty cool for them to get a lot of exposure, and some of those teams that you might not see play too often get some pub and some national notoriety. So real quick, going back to that Notre Dame Clemson game. Notre Dame is 29-3 in their last 32 games. They have won 22 straight games at home, and they've won 12 games in a row overall. So this is not going to be a cakewalk for Clemson. A lot of people are, probably saying, I think that line should be flipped. Notre Dame should be the favorite. Notre Dame has looked really good in some games this year, and they've also looked very average, very pedestrian in some games. So this is going to be a very, very, very interesting game going forward for Clemson and for Notre Dame. This is going to shake up the overall landscape for the college football playoff going forward. Two other notes from this past weekend. LSU, last year's national champion. You see, they are not in the top 25. They fell again, getting beat up by Auburn, but they have fallen now to 2-3 on the season. That is the last time a defending national champion fell to 2-3 was Georgia Tech in 1991. So pretty interesting. And then, Joe, I know you'll like this note, but it was a bad weekend for the Harbaugh brothers. The Ravens lose, and to me was the biggest upset of the weekend. Michigan State, who lost to Rutgers week 1, who got frankly embarrassed by Rutgers week 1, goes into Michigan and just beats. Now, it ended up being a fairly close game, but they beat up on the Wolverines. So Sparty took out the Wolverines, and everyone's looking at Michigan after that win against Minnesota. Think they're riding high, and then all of a sudden Sparty comes in, whacks them, and surprisingly to me they're still ranked in the top 25. But so very, very interesting. We'll see what they do the rest of the season. But and they're playing Indiana this weekend, so. Indiana's the 13th ranked team in the country. Pretty crazy. And just looking at the overall top 25, I want you guys to look at team number 15 and team number 25. Team number 15 hails from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Coastal Carolina. If you would have told me 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago that Coastal Carolina had a relevant football team, I would have said I didn't even know they were in Division I. So pretty awesome for them. And then at number 25, Liberty University. First time they have ever been in the top 25 in their school's history. So pretty cool for both of those teams. And we will see, what shakes out this weekend. Now, Joe, I have a question for you. Do you believe in the transitive property? Do you know what the transitive property is?
Hit me with it.
Okay, so like if A is better than B and B is better than C, then C is better than A. You know what I mean?
Right.
Okay, so if Rutgers beat Michigan State and Michigan State beat Michigan, is Rutgers better than Michigan?
Too many variables. I'm going to say no.
Okay, yeah. But I just thought that, and a lot of times I like to play that game, but, when all things said and done, you kind of clear the table and then you play the game on the field.
Yeah, but, only tiebreakers does that logic apply to.
Yeah. But I thought that was kind of fun. We're going to talk a little bit more about Ohio State and Rutgers on Thursday, but Rutgers being from New Jersey, I just wanted to get into some fun facts here I got about the state of New Jersey. So
yeah, do it.
All right. So did you know the state of New Jersey is the home to the most diners in the world?
Did not.
Okay.
Interesting.
Did you know the names on the Monopoly board are based on street names from Atlantic City?
Did not.
So I kind of knew that, but I didn't know all of them were.
Yeah.
The first professional baseball game was played in Hoboken, New Jersey in 1846. Can you name any famous singers from New Jersey? I bet you can.
I'm just going to say Bon Jovi. That's the only one I know.
Nailed it. Bon Jovi for sure. Bruce Springsteen.
Okay.
And then Jack Nicholson, obviously the actor hails from New Jersey. Also, Rutgers played in the first college football game ever against Princeton. Both hail from New Jersey. That game was played in 1869. And of course, New Jersey isn't always known for the best things.
No,
it's
they get beat up a little bit.
It's known for gym tan and laundry a lot of times from Jersey Shore. So, but some interesting facts about New Jersey.
See, this is why you're not invited to my cash cab right here, that you know that stuff.
Yeah, well, it's totally useless knowledge that, if I'm drinking during an Ohio State Rutgers game that I can throw out. Exactly. And then the Rutgers coach now, Greg Schiano, former Rutgers head coach. He's also from New Jersey, and he worked his way up the coaching ranks, and he took over the Rutgers program originally in the year 2000. And he turned it was a really, really bad program back then, which it has been as well, but he turned it into a pretty decent, respectable program. They got to as high as ranked 7th in the country. I believe it was in 2007, but he had this phrase, keep chopping wood, and that was his go-to saying. And it kind of got a little bit obnoxious, but as a coach, you can respect that if his players bought into that.
Well, and what I like about that, like they're the whipping boy of that, that whole division, but they get extra money into their program by competing with those other schools.
Sure.
And I think over a period of time, that helps build a program, honestly, if you can stomach it.
Right. And, like you said, too, they're kind of that bottom team in the Big Ten. But if they can compete and get better, like the bar is not set too high for them, where if they can win 6 games a year or 5 games a year, that's a big improvement over what they've been doing. And if they can show up and occasionally, you get that 6, 7, 8 win year and make it to a nice bowl game, I think that brings in some recruits and makes you, not the laughing stock anymore. It makes you respectable. But Greg Schiano did a fantastic job in his first stint at Rutgers, where he then was offered the Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coaching job. He was that for 2 seasons. He was also the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. He's good friends with Urban Meyer, and he was the Ohio State defensive coordinator for 3 years. He had a little bit of a fiasco where he was, the Ohio State obviously being well known, a lot of times other teams will sort of poach your assistant coaches for their head coach. In Tennessee, the Volunteers back in 2018 were looking at him as a possible head coach. And then going back to the whole Penn State scandal with Paterno, he was a member of that coaching staff, not involved in any way, but Tennessee offered him the job and then pulled it back. So that was just a bad look for him from a PR standpoint, but also for Tennessee, in the long run, not offering him that job because of that. He also then took a job with the New England Patriots as their defensive coordinator, but then he opted out. He just wanted more time with his family. And then he took a year off and eventually back to Rutgers this season. So, I root for him. I think he's a good coach, and I think Rutgers is probably the perfect place for him. So, wish him well, but I saw the lines 36 or 37.5 this weekend.
Not a whole lot of respect.
I think that's low. I think that's too low. I think the Buckeyes win this game by 6 touchdowns or more. So I think that line should more realistically be like 43.5, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, they're going to tear them up just by how much.
Absolutely. So let's see. We got a little bit of time left. A couple baseball notes. Obviously, we're in the off season, but a couple of Indians notes that are one good or two good, two bad. But the Indians have decided not to re-sign Brad Hand, which some people might be happy about. But he struggled in his playoff appearance this year. But he really overall was pretty good for the Indians, and something that's hard to find is a good left-handed relievers, and the Indians, he was going to make over $10 million, I believe, this year. And in a year of COVID, the Indians in general are not a big market team where they can just go out and pay everybody. So they have declined his option, Brad Hand, and also a guy that I love, Carlos Santana. Most likely
they'll feel that one.
Well, and I hope they can bring him back on a smaller contract, because I think he's a guy that loves Cleveland and Cleveland loves him. But like you said, I think we'll feel that one. Now, he didn't have the highest batting average this year in production, but he's just one of those leaders in the clubhouse that is gonna just be a good teammate and put up some sort of numbers. Now, the good news for the Indians, and not necessarily good from a wins-loss perspective, but Shane Bieber is one of the 3 finalists for the Cy Young Award, which is pretty cool. And Jose Ramirez is one of the 3 finalists for the American League MVP. So, sweet. Hopefully they get some awards and get recognized for what they did during the shortened season. But and it's been a long, long time since the Indians had an MVP on their team. A long time. I believe it was the 1950s. But Indians have shown a ton of success with pitchers in general, and I think they have 5 Cy Young winners in the last 13 years. So that's a pretty impressive stat. And one more cool story from baseball. John Lester, who a lot of Indians fans probably remember with being a pitcher for the Chicago Cubs, is also not going to be renewed. He's a free agent. So he went, and I don't know the exact situation, but he was out at some Chicago bars this weekend, and he spent $47,000, including a 34% tip because he wore the jersey number 34. I thought that was kind of neat. But he spent $47,000 on alcohol for Cubs fans this weekend as kind of a, hey, thanks, cheers to you guys.
A lot of cabbage right there.
But when you sign, I think he signed like a 6-year, $150 million contract, way back when. I think he can.
At the stadium, that's like 5 beers. Though.
Yeah, right. 47,000. I'll take my 5 beers ahead of time. So just a couple of baseball notes. Cool. So, well, being election day, Joe, did you get out and vote?
I did.
You did?
First thing in the morning.
You voted today?
Yeah.
Awesome. Good for you. Now, hopefully, by the time, if you're listening to this on a podcast, it's going to be Wednesday, so it's going to be too late. But if you're watching today on Tuesday, hopefully you got out and vote. The best decision I made 2 weeks ago, I went down to Oak Hill, voted early. It was 70 degrees. I only had to wait for 5 minutes. It was awesome. So, hopefully everyone gets out and votes today. And again, I don't give a shit if you're voting for Trump. I don't give a shit if you're voting for Biden. Just get out and vote and do your responsibility.
That's Justin's PSA right there, baby.
Yes. Yeah. Can we put that on a
I don't give a shit who you vote for. Go and vote.
Just go vote. But okay. So I thought we'd get into some interesting election day facts and tidbits. So now there was obviously elections before this, but the first established election, can you guess the year?
Not even gonna try.
That's all right. 1845. Okay. 1845. Now, most people know Election Day is the first Tuesday of November, but do you know Election Day cannot be Tuesday, November 1st? It cannot be. Election Day has to be the first Tuesday after the first Monday of November. So therefore, it can never be November 1st. It can be the 2nd all the way up to the 8th.
Is there a practical reason for that? Or they just pulled it out of their
Maybe
behind?
They just don't want it the day after Halloween.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I think a lot of this, though, is like when, back in the 1800s, in order to certify elections, they had to travel long distances and they had to make sure there was enough time and stuff like that.
That's a good point.
Now it doesn't matter. I mean, we could certify it within 20 hours of when it happens.
That's a very, very good point. But now, like you said, though, with that, there's certain states that, everybody's all doing all these pre-voting, and which is great. And I saw, but states like Pennsylvania are not allowed to even touch or open those ballots till Election Day. So that's why they're saying, they're being flooded with these millions and millions of ballots. But a lot of times they're not even allowed to touch them until sometimes in certain cases, I believe, till the polls close. So that's why they're saying, we might not know unless it's an absolute blowout, who gets those electoral college votes until, a week from now.
Let's do Thanksgiving.
Exactly.
We'll be celebrating it sometime in the future.
Yeah. Here's an interesting fact about George Washington. George Washington's first campaign, he spent nearly all his money, going back to alcohol, on booze for his supporters.
Yes.
So, you're seeing all these commercials, and thank God we don't have to. And if I get another freaking text message about who I'm voting for, and if I can ask my 3 friends to vote, and if I can trust those people to go out and support, no, I just, and I saw you even did that over the weekend. I just started, for my own entertainment, responding funny messages to them, where I said, they said, "Did you vote yet?" And I said, and I shouldn't have, but I just responded, "Yes." That's, and I thought that would be the end of it. And no, now can we have you go out and have 3 people? So I said, "Yeah, I already talked to Jim Bob. I talked to Cooter."
See, mine came from a dark, angry place. Yours came from a nice, hilarious place.
Well, I try to have a little bit of fun if they're going to come at me with all these questions, but now I just stop responding. So, this is an interesting fact. In 1994, in the state of Wyoming, a tie was broken by pulling a ping pong ball out of a cowboy hat. That sounds very Wyoming.
Yes,
doesn't
right?
it?
A big cowboy hat.
Boy, like a 10-gallon hat.
Yeah.
In Vegas, and this happened in 2011. Now, I think this was for city council, so it wasn't a major seat, but it was declared a tie. Neither candidate wanted to spend the $600 it costs to do an official recount. So what they did was they took out a deck of cards, very Vegas, and the high card won. So that's how that person won.
Shit, me, these are real things. Mm-hmm. Holy crap.
Yeah. Right. So I was curious about some interesting facts, and I got a couple on my email this morning, so I thought I'd throw that in there. Now, it has been exactly 100 years since women were given the right to vote, which was, I want to say, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. But very interestingly, that, it started in 1918, but very interestingly, they're going through a lot what we were going through. That was the Spanish flu. A lot of people were fighting wearing face masks in public because that's how it spread. So, those who, what do they say? Those who forget history are bound to repeat it. Yeah. So I just thought that was a really interesting fact. obviously 1965, the Voting Rights Act, which was probably one of the biggest civil rights acts, gave all people, regardless of race, religion, so especially blacks, their option to exercise their right to vote under the protection of the 15th Amendment. And now the Electoral College, this is always like an interesting thing. This is something I know a little bit about, but not a ton about. Now, you're going to hear the number tonight, 270. That's how many Electoral College votes you need to win the election. So, Hillary Clinton in 2016 actually won the popular vote, but Donald Trump had a significant lead in the Electoral College. And this also happened in the year 2000 with Al Gore and George Bush. The younger George Bush. So where the Electoral College gets, and I probably Mo later on in the day will know way more about this than I will, but the Electoral College was basically invented by the founding fathers, from my understanding, because there were 6 major cities in the country at that time. So if they said all we need to do is go to those 6 cities, exactly, and if we can get them to vote for us, we're going to win the election. Yep. So if you go to Philadelphia, New York, Boston, whatever it might be, you're going to win. You're going to get that popular vote. And win the election. So there, you don't need to go to rural Ohio or rural Pennsylvania or rural New York or whatever it might be. So that apparently is why that was established. There was also, and I'm going to go way back to the year 1876. This is a Electoral College here, where Rutherford B. Hayes and a guy named, and I don't know his first name, but Tilden. And literally this almost caused a civil war, like an uprising in 1876, because there was mass demonstrations, there was fighting in the street, all this stuff. And please, people, do not go out and do that tonight. Like, whoever you vote for, if they win, if they lose, accept the results. We're all friends. No one's enemies. And I promise the shit we shuffle around every 4 years will not make that dramatic effect. Now, I know some people are very, and I am too. I believe in who I'm voting for. But, just be civil. We're all friends here. We all want what's best for the country. Now, this person might believe something different than this person, but at the end of the day, we all want what's best for the country. At least we hope. So, there's a nice second. See, that PSA. Was perfect. That's all nice second. Do you have any other electoral, or not? Doesn't have to be Electoral College, but election day?
I'll leave it to you. Deferred to Justin.
No. So that's all I really got. I just thought a couple of interesting notes there. But yeah, hopefully everyone's able to go out and vote. I saw the numbers are way, way up from 2016 and maybe some of the highest in the history. So, hopefully I know this has been sort of a contentious year and couple years even, but again, whoever you're voting for, the best thing is, the best way you can exercise your right as an American is to go out and vote. And that's all I'm going to say. Hopefully, I just hope everything comes out smoothly, and we're not fighting till Thanksgiving on this. Right. So there are 79 days, by the way, from election day till inauguration day. So hopefully we have a clear cut winner by then. So with that said, that's all I got to say. We are going to have 2 awesome guests on Thursday. We're going to have Melissa from Sweet Melissa's. Sweet. And yeah, sweet. Yeah, no pun intended there. And we're also going to have Rick Williams, who is a veteran. He runs YSU's Veteran Center, and a little bit ahead of Veterans Day. I thought that he would be a great guest to come on and tell us what he does. So we will see you Thursday. Everyone get out and vote. Have a great day and be kind to each other.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. If you like our programming, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or subscribe to your favorite podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify. This is original Youngstown content, and we would appreciate you sharing the videos and the word about us. Thank you.